Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome back to Wall Street Silver. Joining us today is the legend Willem Middelkoop, author of The Big Reset and founder of Commodity Discovery Fund. Welcome back, Willem.
Well, great to be back. It's been a while. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So, hey, Willem, you're the author of The Great Reset. You're
Big Reset.
The Big Reset. I'm sorry.
The Great Reset. That's
Klaus.
Klaus, yeah. And I've heard you speculate. I follow your Twitter account, and you believe we're right in the middle of it right now, and we're trying to sort of identify the signs of it, and how this plays out. But the big question mark is no one knows how this ends, right? One of the big new signs that we've seen out there is China has been announcing how much gold they own, or at least giving us a number of what they want us to know. And I wanted to talk with you about this. Walk us through what's happened to history. China normally doesn't talk about their gold, do they?
No, they like to be a bit secretive. And we shouldn't forget that you have the Chinese central bank, the Bank of China, who has its own gold holdings. But there are also several different institutions who are, hoarding and collecting gold. But if we stick to the Bank of China, they published, I think in 2016, for the first time, how much gold they hold, and then they reported some additions to their gold holdings in 2018, and then they went dark. They went quiet on the gold, on their gold holdings. And now for 2 months in a row, they added over 30 tons per month, which is quite a bit, 30 tons of gold. So they added 30 tons for 2 days in a row, November and December, and this was published. And when they make this public themselves, it's a sign. It's a sign towards the financial markets. I think it's a sign to America. We also know they have been selling some treasuries. They haven't been adding any substantial amount of treasuries since 2011, 2012. And of course, we know that China is teaming up with Russia, not in a militarily way, but in a financial economic way. And, they're fed up with the US telling the rest of the world what the rules of the game are. And now we have the BRICS Plus and all the countries joining the BRICS. So I call this, it's the West against the rest now. So we in the West, we think we can design the rules of the game. We can tell the world how to play the game. But over 140 countries in the world are saying now, oh, you better stop telling us what to do. We just buy physical gold. We don't buy any treasuries anymore, because we have seen dozens of countries adding to their gold reserve. I always say every country east of Germany is buying physical gold. Poland has been adding. Hungary has been adding. So many countries in the east have been adding. And for me, this is all part of this big monetary reset, which I envisioned in The Big Reset. I wrote The Big Reset 2013, published it early 2014. And on the back cover, you could read that around 2020, huge changes would be needed in the financial system. We need to find a new anchor, successor for the dollar. We need to have a revaluation of gold, a devaluation of the dollar, and we need debt restructurings. And this is all coming into play now.
China's public number that they've released right now is about 2,000 tons of gold. But I've heard that it's impossible to export gold from China. And China's one of the biggest. They're a huge miner of gold also within their own country, but any gold going into China it's a one-way trip. It's impossible to export it. So the reality is China has a lot more than 2,000 tons that they're publicly admitting to, correct?
Yeah, like I said in the first reaction, there are two other sovereign institutions. You have the SAFE. There are some other holders of large amounts of gold. Actually, the Big Reset was translated into Mandarin, into Chinese, and I was invited to do a speech there in 2016. And there was a former director, Chinese director, actually the first Chinese director who used to work in Washington for the IMF as a Chinese director on their board. And he read the Big Reset, and he asked me some tricky questions after my presentation. And he pointed out that there was a mistake in the book, that because I said in the book that all the gold holdings were held by the Bank of China. And he said, no, we have other institutions who hold the gold as well. And we have had some analysts making calculations how much gold the Chinese have accumulated over the last 10, 15 years, let's say after the Lehman crisis, after the start of the great financial crisis. And the analysts, they point out that they should have at least 10,000 tons of gold.
Wow.
And if you add all the retail holders of gold, it actually could be 20,000 tons. And you know what happened with retail holders who own the gold? In a country like China, just like the US, the government can say you have to hand it over to the central bank, to the national bank, because we need it to stabilize the system or whatever. So don't focus on the 2,000 tons. It's much more.
Yeah, I would not believe that either. It's a misleading number for political purposes. But China's plan, this is another article that's been pretty hot in the news the other day, is China's trying to create an international oil yuan renminbi market, and gold is part of that. Explain to us how that would work.
Yeah, that's like you know about the gold deal, the petrodollar deal of 1947. We had the closing of the gold window in 1971, so the dollar wasn't convertible to gold anymore. Then there was a dollar crisis, and Kissinger fixed that crisis to travel to Saudi Arabia and to propose to the Saudis that oil would always be sold for dollars and dollars only, and that's the petrodollar deal. And that has been around since 1974. And now in this article, this is research, not by Zero Hedge or not by Middelkoop or Wall Street Silver, but by BNP Paribas. It's one of the leading banks in Europe. And just like Zoltan Pozar's speech, and he's a researcher, he's an analyst for Credit Suisse, they both come to the same conclusion that there's a huge shift, and you could have a petroyuan deal in which China can use its currency to buy oil, and this is a highly significant piece of research, and I would advise everybody to read it. So now we have Credit Suisse, now we have BNP Paribas. We also had a piece of research by ING talking about the possibility that the BRICS countries will start to operate their own world reserve currency or their own currency, joint currency. And I don't know how this will end, but I do know it's part of a monetary reset, and it has started. We're in the first innings, and when we look back in 2030, we will say, oh wow, lots has changed in the last 10 years.
So let's say, for example, Saudi Arabia would send oil to China, and then they might be paid in yuan or the renminbi. Yeah. But then on the Shanghai exchange, the gold exchange there, Saudi Arabia could immediately convert if they don't want to hold yuan, they can convert their Chinese currency directly into gold on the Shanghai exchange, essentially cutting New York and the US dollar and the Western gold markets out of the transaction completely, right? Is that the gist of?
Yeah, I'm currently in the process of revising the Big Reset, because the last revision is from 2016. You can download it for free if you Google it, the Big Reset download. You can download it for free on our website. But I'm revising it now, and when you do the research and when you read all the stuff being available from Russia and China on this topic, the Russians are very open about it, that they want to change the system. Already in the Big Reset, the edition of 2016, I quote many sources from Russia and China explaining how the US is manipulating the gold price, keeping it low, and the Chinese were happy with a lower gold price because they wanted to add to their gold holdings, and they communicated to the US that they don't want to buy gold at a very high price. So the Chinese and the US were both in the same team, let's say in the last 10 years, to keep the gold price down. But now that's changing. And that we saw a correction of the gold price in the last 2 years. That was quite a long one, but now we've seen gold has bottomed. And today, the Bank of America put out a piece of research saying that gold will go over 2,000 this year and might reach higher levels. So I think gold is into play. Silver was leading this first move up from, let's say, September, October. Gold is taking over now, but we all know silver is gold with some ecstasy, and when gold starts to run, silver will run a bit more. And I think things are starting to get very, very interesting.
Yeah, here's the latest on the gold chart, and it wouldn't take. Here's 2,000 up here. It wouldn't take that much to reach it. I mean, that's
no.
That could happen. That could happen in a 2 or 3 day time frame very easily. If some,
I don't know if you are technical analysis guys, but I'm a fan of the Elliott wave counts, and I follow A.V. Gilbert, which is a great analyst. And A.V. Gilbert, if you follow his counts, he said we just need one more correction, and then we have the start of wave 3. Wave 3 might have started already, and wave 3, as you might know, is the most powerful wave, and it's a longer wave than wave 1. Wave 1 is what we've seen in 2020, when gold was climbing $300, $400, $500 in short time frame. And if you have the start of wave 3, gold could run towards 2,500 very, very easily in a very short time frame. And look what happens to the gold equities then, because they are so undervalued. And I'm a fund manager of a commodity fund, and we invest in exploration stocks which have gold, silver, but also the battery metals in their projects. And if you look at the valuation of exploration companies, they made a new low in the last 50 years, just last year, if you compare that to the CRB, to the commodity index. So the stocks have such an amazing room to run. And actually, we had a great start in the first trading week of this year. We're up almost 5% for the first week, because it's all starting to move in the right direction now.
I've had a few stocks also in the sector that are up dramatically. Some of the stocks have already moved more than 100% off of the lows of, if you were to pick up any of these stocks in September, there's a handful of them. I won't go into names, because then people will be upset that I didn't mention other names. But
I did several interviews at the end of last year, November, December. I said, watch the tax loss selling season. Once that's over, and that's around Christmas, you always have runs at least 20% in the first 2 months of the new year, but you could have a move of 40, 50, 60%. And we're in the middle of that move. Our fund is up from the bottom 15% from the bottom of last year. Last year was a bad year. If you look at the Toronto Stock Exchange Venture Index, where all the smallest junior mines and exploration companies are listed, that one was down 37% last year.
Wow.
We were down 27%, so we outperformed that index. But if you look at the senior names, the gold producers, they're starting to move. They're always the first to react. They're the first to move. And if you want to know if a correction is finished in gold, look at the senior gold equities. Once they start to run, it's always the best sign that the new bull market has started.
Gotcha. There's a tweet that you made yesterday that I wanted to put up here.
Yeah.
First Credit Suisse analyst Zoltan Pozar claimed we are witnessing the birth of Bretton Woods 3.0.
Yeah.
So, and if anyone's interested, the link is in the description to Willem's Patreon, where he has this article. Walk us through what this means, though. What are you talking about here?
Well, like I said in a previous comment, Zoltan Pozsar, he used to be with the Federal Reserve actually, and he's a strategist. He's an interest strategist with Credit Suisse, which is one of the main banks in Switzerland. And I followed this guy because he was the one when we had this repo crisis, Q3 2018. You might remember that. We had a crisis it actually was a funding crisis on the US debt, the US budget. And this crisis was a strange one. Nobody understood what was happening. The Federal Reserve said they had to support the market for a few days, then it was for a few weeks, then it was for a few months. Then they said we have to support it until year end 2019. It was actually 2019. And not 2018. And then the Corona crisis hit, and everybody forgot about the repo crisis. But during this repo crisis, I was looking for answers what was happening. And Zoltan Pozsar, he had the best analysis. So I followed this guy since for a few years now. So when he started to put out research after Russia invaded Ukraine, and he wrote his first piece of research March 5th. So that's only 2 weeks after the start of their war. And then he started to analyze it, and he was calling for the start of Bretton Woods 3.0. And then I thought this is very interesting because my thesis of the Big Reset is explaining how the financial system, the current financial system with the USS Anchor started in 1944 with the Bretton Woods Conference. We all know that. And that was Bretton Woods 1.0. And then in 1971, Nixon had to close the gold window. They took the dollar off the gold standard, and that's Bretton Woods 2.0. That's how analysts describe these phases. And now we have this Credit Suisse analyst claiming that we're witnessing the birth of Bretton Woods 3.0. So I thought that was highly significant. So once I started reading his research, and I'll send you the links, you can put it in the show notes. He wrote, I think, 5 pieces of research since March this year. And actually, he is claiming that this is the start, this is the birth of a new monetary system, or is a move away from the US dollars financial system, which we know since 1944, which is actually almost 80 years ago. And every 80, 90 years, you have this change in the international monetary system. If you study history, on average, financial system is changed every 92 years, and he claims that China has this special deal with Russia now, making the Bank of China the central bank of all commodities. That's his words. And he's claiming that China can do all the arbitrage now on the Russian commodities, which is actually true, because we don't want it in the West anymore, because Putin wanted to send us oil and gas, but he asked us to pay in rubles or in gold or even in Bitcoin. And we declined that. So all these Russian commodities are going to India and China now, and China is becoming very powerful. And China is getting more and more powerful without firing a shot. I don't think President Xi is playing a very intelligent game here, and getting more and more powerful without spending any money. Actually, he's getting all these commodities almost for free. And he can do the arbitrage. And then President Xi, what did he do after the COVID crisis was over, and after their Congress, the Communist Congress, he traveled, the first country he traveled to, first he went to the G20 in Bali, but right after that, he flew to Saudi Arabia to make a special deal with the Saudis. And that's why BNP Paribas puts out this research now. That's why Credit Suisse puts out this research now, that we're witnessing the birth of Bretton Woods 3.0. And the problem is, once you're in these big changes, it's like, well, if you're surrounded by trees, you don't see the forest anymore. And this, with these changes in the international monetary system, you don't know what to make of it. But if you look back 5 years from now, it will be very clear what has happened. And actually, there was a piece of research put out recently by Rabobank claiming that Zoltan Poza is wrong, and you know, the system is starting to fight back because they can't accept, of course, an analyst from Switzerland claiming that it's the end of the Bretton Woods system as we know it.
Well, I mean, arguing with words doesn't make it not true, right? I mean, it's
yeah. Well, I mean, follow the money. And once the Chinese start to buy gold again, and all these other countries start to buy gold again, and Zoltan Poza is claiming that's the end of the paper system now. It's the end of the paper Bretton Woods system. And he says the Bretton Woods 1.0, that was a gold-based system. Then Bretton Woods 2.0 was a paper-based system around US treasuries. And now Bretton Woods 3.0 is a system built around gold and commodities again.
Yeah, nobody wants the treasuries anymore.
No
one's buying them.
But if you read his latest piece of Zoltan, and that was very interesting, because his clients are institutional investors, not retail investors, and he has spoken to over 150 institutional investors, he said in an interview recently. And now he is advising his institutional investors to quit the 60-40 investment portfolio model, which is 60% equities, 40% bonds, and to change it in a 20-40-20-20 system. And 20%, the first 20% is cash. Then you have 40% in equities, 20% in bonds, because institutional investors, you know, they can't go to zero. So he's advising them to only invest 20% in bonds, and then another 20% institutional investors should invest in commodities now. That's his advice. Well, if you know institutional portfolios, they invest on average 1% of their money in commodities. So you have this huge trend change starting now, that institutional investors, they need to wake up, and they are starting to wake up, and they have to move more money towards commodities and towards gold. And this is the start of a huge new bull market, and we have this record low valuation. So this is getting very interesting for a fund manager from the Netherlands who started the Commodity Discovery Fund, and to invest in all these great mineral and metal discoveries for pennies to the dollar.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. I'm fully invested in all these already, so you know, I get excited when I hear you talk about
conferences. So
yeah,
I know you follow it.
Yeah, I'm excited. But hey, there's something else. You know, I see you've got this on Patreon here. Is that where, you know, everyone follows your Twitter account already, Willem Middelkoop. I'll have that link in the description. But tell us the story. You started a Patreon account also.
Yeah, you know, I've been active on Twitter for almost 10 years and have quite a bit of followers. And I give everything there for free, you know, for 10 years. I wanted to educate the people. But when you have so many followers, people start to you always get these nasty reactions. So I had to close the comments. And I felt the need to have a more like a smaller community. I call it the Friends of Willem, become a friend of Willem. I'm your personal guide to survive the big reset. And people who are interested to follow this, you know, this is not for everybody, but if you're really interested into this and you have some money, you know, and you're investing, you should know what's going on. And I try to guide people as good as possible. And I charge $15 a month for that. And that, I don't need the money. I like the money. I don't need the money, but the money makes sure I get a serious group of people who are interested to discuss this. And if you want to ask me a question, you can ask me a question. I will answer you. And that's what I want to do with this Patreon platform.
Yeah. And also I should point out, Americans are not allowed to invest in the Commodity Discovery Fund.
Oh yeah, they can.
Oh, we can.
Nice.
Well, I thought Americans could not.
It was changed. We changed it. We were able to have a special US dollar asset class. So we have investors in our fund, also from Canada and from the US. But people who just want to have the research, go to this Patreon platform. And also revising the big reset. And I will publish every month, I will publish a new chapter, an updated chapter. and try to guide people as good as possible on this very complicated topic.
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing also investment research and stock ideas on the Patreon?
Yeah, a bit, because I'm a fund manager, I'm an investor. So when I see a huge new discovery, I'll just give a shout out. I published a list of the best silver stocks recently, but it's let's say it's 80% reset related, it's 20% investment related.
So am I going to get a complimentary membership to the friend of Middelkoop?
You know, I would like to give you one, but the problem is with Patreon. You can only get connected.
I'll
when
pay.
You pay.
I'll cough up to $15. All right.
I'll do a refund.
All right.
Nice.
Thank you, Willem. Thank you. Well, Willem, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. You're our in the history of Wall Street Silver's YouTube, you are our #1 most watched video. One of your videos from last year was the top video we've ever had. So maybe this one will be competitive with one of our best watched videos. Our audience loves.
Once you start looking better than Daniela, we might reach one.
I'm never gonna look better.
That's not happening.
I mean, maybe Ivan has a shot, but not me. I'm an old guy, but right, okay.
Bye,
all right. Thank you,
guys.
Bye bye.